So pleased to be part of this SEL panel today. I've been a huge fan of Charles Bridge for years. And I've been the publisher and editor in chief of Chicken Soup for the Soul since 2008. And about 10 years in, I realized we had a big hole in our lineup because we didn't have books for babies and toddlers and young elementary school students. So I reached out to Charles Bridge because they were my favorite book publisher, and I asked them if they would like to get involved in making a line of Chicken Soup for the Soul books for those little kids. And they said yes, which was thrilling for me. And it's been a 7-year effort, and we have now completed the line, and Charles Bridge has 12 different Chicken Soup for the Soul babies books for ages 0 to 3 and 6 Chicken Soup for the Soul kids books for ages 4 to 7. I wanted to work with Charles Bridge because their books are such high quality. They're the kind of books that kids love to snuggle up with. They're really entertaining, even as they convey great messaging. And they instill a love of reading in kids from the very beginning, which is so important. And what I like about them is that they're accurate and they're positive. And they do teach kids the values that we want this next generation to have. But even as they're doing that, they're entertaining the kids and they're helping them keep that sense of wonder and fun, which is what you hope that kids will never lose as they continue to be readers for the rest of their lives. And of course, what the best children's books do falls into the realm of SEL, social and emotional learning. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Let's start with Molly Beth Griffin, who wrote Far, Far Away.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm Molly Beth Griffin. My forthcoming book is Far, Far Away, which is illustrated by Bao Liu. And it's a story about a kid going camping in the Boundary Waters in Minnesota for the first time and being really excited about seeing animals and sleeping in a tent and all of those things. But he gets really overwhelmed quickly by the discomfort and the inconvenience of being in the wilderness and being far from home. So it's a story about doing hard things and keeping doing hard things in pursuit of wonder. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I like to hike with my kids here and look for rocks and take pictures of birds and things like that. So I'm excited to be here to talk with you about SEL. There's SEL in all of my books, really, so thank you for having me.
Hi, so I am Andrea J, Loney, and I am the author right now of 3 Chicken Soup for the Soul for Babies books. One of them, the first one is Keep Trying, Don't Give Up. The second one is Listen First, Then Go, which evidently is a favorite with preschool teachers at the beginning of the year. And the most recent one that just came out is Big Emotions Bubble Up. It's just an undersea adventure through emotions and oopsies and forgiveness and all of that. I had a wonderful time writing this. I do write other things as well. I have award-winning picture books and chapter books. I write fiction and nonfiction. I got my writing career started in the early 2000s, writing for the Chicken Soup for the Soul TV show. Many years ago. So it's really cool to come full circle and to, and to be able to come back to Chicken Soup in that way. I live here in Los Angeles. I'm a teacher. I am learning how to take plants home from Trader Joe's and keep them living for as long as possible or replace them as quickly as possible. And that's what I do. Thanks.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Sarah Lynne Reul. I am an author and illustrator of a bunch of picture books, and Bean Sprout is my first book with Charles Bridge. And it's a book about a boy whose class is doing a seed growing experiment, and he's super excited about what might possibly grow. But his ends up being the only seed in the class that doesn't sprout. And I wrote this book because I've had the experience of being really excited about how something might turn out. And then having the experience of it not turning out the way that I expected it to, and dealing with that disappointment and, the grief that comes with our expectations not coming to pass. So yeah, I live north of Boston. I grew up in New York, and I live with my family here, my 2 kids and 2 cats and dog and my husband.
You know, there's a lot of hard data to support the value of SEL, which you have all built into your books. So I was looking up the statistics, and I read that one county found that their graduation rate soared from 62% of kids graduating to 84% of kids graduating after they implemented a social and emotional learning program. And another school district reported that their suspension rate went down 55% after they put an SEL program in place. So what's the best way to communicate these SEL lessons to help kids? And I think that we all know it's through storytelling, because really storytelling has been mankind's preferred method for sharing wisdom and culture and advice for thousands of years. Even before written language existed, there was storytelling. I think that stories really work because they capture the reader or the listener's attention, and they go inside them and get to them emotionally so they can feel the story. And it works with adults and it works with kids. And I just love the fact that we can communicate these SEL values and instill them into kids' brains while also entertaining them. And of course, in the education space, there has been a deliberate focus on promoting SEL skills because it does work. And it's been proven that kids do better at school, at home, in their communities with SEL training. And it cuts down on bullying too, because bullies are really just very unhappy kids who are acting out. And SEL helps them feel better about themselves. So today we're talking about doing SEL training at the very, very beginning, at the baby and toddler and preschool and early elementary level, because it's never too soon to help these kids find the best version of themselves. And so I wanted to talk about the 5 competencies of SEL. And now I'm going to read them. They are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And whether you deliberately try to include these in your stories or they just happen naturally, I just thought it would be interesting to hear which of these SEL skill sets you think are represented in your books. So let me start with Molly with Far, Far Away.
I think are the self-awareness and self-management, because it's about camping for the first time and it's about figuring out that you can do hard things and that doing hard things can be worth it, even when it's really uncomfortable. The character in the book, Rowan, has a lot of big emotions, and they aren't always pretty emotions. He's kind of complainy through a lot of the book, which if you have hiked with kids, you know that hiking with kids is about 90% complaining. Our culture is very obsessed with highlighting and only talking about the positive aspects of our lives. I say #blessed in a sort of ironic way. And that kind of covering over of the hard parts is something we kind of naturally do or are expected to do. And so I think that gives the message that you're doing it wrong if it's uncomfortable. And I really want parents and kids and families who are trying to get outside to know that they're not doing it wrong. You know, if your kid has something in their boot and they spend the whole time complaining about that, that's normal and that's okay. And they're allowed to complain and they're allowed to feel frustrated or, angry about it or to worry about it and express that. And I think that the moms in the book do kind of roll with it and also gently push the kid forward toward that, wonder in the natural beauty that they're aiming for by being out there. So I would like kids to practice feeling those hard emotions and expressing those hard emotions and coping with some physical discomfort, and know that that means they're challenging themselves, and that's a good thing. And that's okay. and for their parents to also see that just because it's hard or uncomfortable or your kid is complaining doesn't mean you should stop. It means you should keep going, and that you're doing something hard together that's worth it.
Yeah, it's never too early to teach kids the value of stepping outside their comfort zones.
Yeah.
So it's so energizing and empowering when you get them to do that. So, Sarah, where do you think your book falls into this framework of the 5 SEL competencies?
I think the main content of the book falls similarly to Molly's in the self-awareness and self-management. It mostly focuses on, it's from the character's point of view and his experience of this hoping and planning, and then his sadness and anger and how it sort of comes out in the classroom. But also, I think through the illustrations, I tried to communicate some of the other pieces, like the social awareness and in the expressions of the kids. So I have this image here of when his classmate has a plant that sprouts, and he wants to be supportive, but he's kind of jealous. And then you can see sort of the emotions, like child here crossing his arms, who is clearly just very jealous and is not afraid of showing those feelings. And then when he is really upset because nothing grew, they have a calm down corner in their classroom. I tried to put down some little posters because there's some cognitive behavioral therapy skills that I put down here, like box breathing and sort of some things that you can do to help calm your body so that you're able to take those next steps. And I also tried to show the expressions of the other kids showing concern for him when he's upset. And, they're not sure what they can do to help, but they want to do something.
Andrea, I think you probably address all the SEL competencies in your book for babies called Big Emotions.
I was looking at the list, and I was like, that's basically the plot of my little undersea adventure here, where and actually part of where the idea of this came from was when I used to be a substitute teacher. The first graders would come back from the yard after recess, and oh my gosh, this thing happened. Someone's crying, someone's mad, and someone's there to like spill the tea of everything that happened. And then someone's there to refute them. And it's just this epic battle. But it really comes down to someone unintentionally doing something to somebody else. And then there's feelings, but then those feelings cause somebody else to have feelings. And because I guess when you're that little, I remember one of the little girls was like, it feels like I'm on fire, because they didn't have the words for the emotion. So in this case, Dolphin is playing a little too rough and bumps into baby Otter, who bumps into baby Pufferfish, who was not puffed at the beginning of the story. But once that happens, now we're puffed. That is complete lack of self-awareness on the part of Dolphin. Octopus kind of shows them how to manage the emotion. So that leads to the self-management, which leads to all the characters gaining some kind of an awareness. Oh, that's what this feeling is. Now that I know what it is, I can do something about it. And then it moves on to a social awareness of maybe I should be more gentle with my tiny friends who puff up when they get scared. And then that leads Dolphin to make a different decision for the kind of activity that's going to be a little bit less rough for the smaller animals. So it's kind of that whole process of going from not even understanding what's going on and just being upset to figuring out what it is, having a plan, and then implementing that plan, and then being able to move on with that. So it was a lot of fun.
As authors, do you have any specific training in how to write a book that incorporates SEL, or did it just happen to you organically? Sarah, let's go with you first.
Yeah, I think it just happened organically. I think, I personally have a lot of big feelings and I'm in a household with people with big feelings. My writing and drawing helps me sort of process those things. And so that's often how my stories happen.
And I think, Andrea, your SEL training was on the job training, right?
It made a big difference when I got to the point where I was teaching all the ages into the jail system, because what I found by teaching people who are incarcerated was a lot of 6-year-olds who were upset, who never got that hurt taken care of. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of led to other things later on in life. And the fact that we all have the same exact emotions throughout, history of humanity. We've all had the same feelings. And also I'm an auntie and a godmother. So I've spent a lot of time just trying to understand what's going on with people to kind of help them along and help myself along as well.
Molly, life training or SEL training? What went into your book?
No SEL training. As a parent, I guess that gives you some life training. But also, I think training in writing, fiction writing specifically, and poetry is totally relevant because we're writing a character who is supposed to grow and change. And in order for a character to grow and change, they have to manage their emotions. So for a story to be satisfying and to resolve, we learn how to do that. And kids learn how to do that, the writer and the reader too.
I wanted to talk about how you're going to use these books. Now, Andrea, you have a special case because you live in Southern California and you've seen firsthand the impact of the wildfires and the mudslides. So how have you been using your book about big emotions to help your community?
Oddly enough, the day this book came out and I was going to make a, hey, here's my book, was the day that the fire started. And I could see it from like my window. So I was like, oh no, what should I do? But what I ended up doing is making a video. I think the first video was Yay, It's Here. And then sometime after that, I made another video in front of my fish tank with the book, talking about the big emotions that everybody has, because it was a very scary, confusing situation that most of us had never been in quite the same way. And I just recently did school visits in Pasadena, and there were some kids there whose houses had burned. And, and we were just kind of talking about the feelings that come up with that. And also I read it at a preschool where their mascot was a dolphin. And they were very excited about that. And I got to the preschool class right after there had been like some kind of a fight. And they really needed this book to like, that's me right there. And I'm like, yeah, great. So I love how applicable it is.
And let's start with Andrea, because you've got the youngest group there with your book. How can family members or educators use your book past the storytelling and engage in an ongoing discussion with kids about how they can use what they learned from the book?
Okay, well, first of all, I love how on the cover of the book, they put different fish and each one has a different emotion. So it's a fun exercise to look at that and in what emotion is this? Make that face. How does it feel inside when you make that face? There's an entire exercise in the middle of the book where Octopus teaches the little ones basically how to release an emotion so that they can think about it later, like taking a deep breath and just blowing it out like bubbles, which work really well when you're underwater. And at the back of the book, they do have a note for parents. They give some tips for parents on how to deal with things, because I always thought it's fascinating that even though a human being does not have very much life experience, they still have these gigantic emotions.
Molly, what methods do you use in your own life to help you get past those very human emotions?
Well, I love getting outside. It's like 15 below here right now, so it's a little hard sometimes. That's one big way that I help myself process things and calm down. Another is talking to a friend and complaining to a friend. It's sort of a book about complaining. So, it's a great way to process things and help yourself through hard stuff. I think it's important to allow ourselves to rest and to be overwhelmed and be tired, relax a little bit. I think in capitalism, we get pushed really hard to just keep doing all the time, and the burnout is real. So, giving ourselves some space and time to just chill is important. And sometimes medication, and it's okay to involve your doctor, your therapist. For me, it's anxiety. My anxiety is bad enough that sometimes I need other help. So I think we need to talk about all that and to normalize it and with kids and with adults and with parents who are going through all of this hard stuff, that it's really hard to be a parent right now and for the last long while. So giving ourselves some grace to be as good of parents as we can be, which is not perfect, and to help our kids through those hard times too. So I'm hoping that books like this give parents a way in to these conversations, because it's really hard to talk to kids about hard stuff, and kids who are dealing with hard stuff don't always want to talk about it. I feel like the books are kind of an entry point, and that is really a valuable resource for the parents and the teachers and the aunties who need to be able to talk to kids about hard stuff.
Now, another thing I'm wondering is, Sarah, your book deals with so many emotions that adults feel: disappointment, uncertainty, impatience, looking for hope. As you wrote the story, did you find that it actually worked on you as well and changed the way that you were guiding your own children?
It's interesting because the timeline of how writing and drawing a specific story works isn't always within my control. That's what a lot of my books, and I think a lot of SEL stuff is about, feeling frustrated with things that are outside of your control, which I think is one reason why preverbal kids and little kids have so many emotions, is because there's very few things that are within their control. And I think that any of these things are sort of like us finding ways to figure out what we do have control over, like our next choice or our next motion. So when I'm writing a book, it starts out just sort of, for me, usually, I don't usually start a book under contract. I actually started writing Bean Sprout in 2019, which at this point is like 6 years ago. And I started working on the artwork during the first days of COVID. I actually just carved out a little space in my mom's basement. My mom lives nearby, just so that I wasn't in the house with my whole family all the time. But then when it went on submission, and it took a long time for it to find the right home, to find Charles Bridge. This was, over the course of 6 years for me. So then I take a really long time where I'm not working on the book. I'm trying to work on other things. I'm trying to forget about that book. And then when I come back to it, once I have a contract, I'm kind of a different person. And yet I still need to create artwork that was similar to the sample artwork that I made years ago. And so it was sort of interesting coming back into that. And actually, when I came back into making the artwork for this book, I think there was a lot of stuff going on in my family, just some difficult mental health stuff. And one thing that I worked on a lot of was making these tissue paper prints for the backgrounds. And you sort of just put the colors down and you let them dry and you see how they mix. And there's something really satisfying about that process and not having control. So I think actually it's interesting, just in the making of the artwork for this book, I found there was some comfort in not having as much control as I usually do when I'm doing things entirely digitally, and letting things sort of become what they are.
What SEL skill do you wish you had when you were a little kid?
Well, I have always been a people pleaser, always, since I was a little kid. And I think it would have been really good for me as a little kid to not prioritize everyone else's happiness with me over my own well-being.
Yeah, I would have said, if I were asked, I would have said I wish I had had more self-confidence as a little kid. That would have been helpful. Andrea, what SEL skill do you wish you had had when you were a little kid?
Well, to preface, I was raised in a time and a place where we were told pretty is as pretty does, and girls were not allowed to be angry. We had to be nice. And also, as a young Black kid, there's always the issue of, if you're displaying too much of a certain type of emotion, people may feel threatened, all that kind of stuff. So I was really trained to just kind of reel it in and keep it in there, which I'm not good at. So I always had emotional regulation issues that luckily someone showed me I could channel it into words that are written, and then I can make other people cry instead of me being the one crying all the time. And that worked out. But I think if I could have gone back and had something, I would have been told that my sensitivity is a strength and not a thing to be ashamed of or to hide or to wish that I didn't have, and all that. So again, self-confidence, self-acceptance, I think could have gone a long way back then.
All right. Sarah, what SEL skill do you wish that you had had when you were a little kid?
I think if I think about how I try to approach my work now, trying to give myself permission to fail. Like I just messed up my sentence and it's okay. I can keep going. I think that, when I was a kid, I also wanted to make people happy and I was pretty good at school. I was pretty good at a lot of things. And so I wanted to be really, really good. And when I wasn't really good at something immediately, I found it really upsetting and I felt like there was something wrong with me. I think about that a lot with drawing now because I came back to drawing as an adult. I kind of stopped for a really long time, probably around middle school, because I just thought that I wasn't good enough. And I think that's true of a lot of adults. And I think it's very hard to come back as an adult and not judge your drawings, which are basically at the skill level that you stopped practicing at, which might be when you were 7, and be nice to yourself about your drawings not looking like a Van Gogh or, Lewin Fan's illustrations or something.
Man, can you change my answer? Perfectionism, managing perfectionism is huge.
Yeah.
That's a really good answer.
And now I'm going to ask you questions you're not prepared for at all. These are going to be the really fast answers. So when I was a little kid, I wanted to grow up to be a librarian. Andrea, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a doctor and a ballerina and a poet.
Okay. Sarah, how about you?
Figure skater.
Okay. Molly, how about you?
Oh, mine sounds boring now, but I wanted to be a teacher. Both of my parents were teachers. I assumed I'd be a teacher.
All right. Now, when I was a little kid, I read at every opportunity. I even would get caught by my mother sneaking a flashlight under the bed covers so that I could keep reading instead of going to sleep. Sarah, what was your favorite activity outside of school when you were a little kid?
Probably just playing with my toys. Like I had a dollhouse that my dad had built for me, and I loved making little tiny things for it.
Molly, what was your favorite activity outside of school when you were a little kid?
Maybe reading, maybe in the yard. I mean, we did so much just like neighborhood kid messing around. Yeah, something like that.
Andrea, what was your favorite activity outside of school?
It's so funny because it's actually both of those. I read everything there was to read, including like my mother's college textbooks. And I had a dollhouse, but it was a haunted dollhouse because the dolls would keep disappearing, which I found out many years later was my cat and my little sister who would break things and then have to hide them. And then I'd make up stories about like what happened. And yeah, so that was it. My haunted dollhouse and my Psychology 101 books from my mom.
All right. One more unexpected question. So when I was a little kid, I used to actually have dreams in which I was flying around like a bird. Andrea, what superpower did you wish you had when you were a kid?
I honestly wish I had confidence. That would have been a superpower for me because I was tiny and invisible and always scared of what people would think about me. So
I thought about this a lot when I was younger. I wanted to be able to throw or catch anything with like perfect accuracy. And I was not an athlete, but I don't
The
know.
perfectionist in you.
There you go.
And Molly, what was your superpower dream as a little kid?
Well, I don't know when this started, but for sure now I want to be able to talk to trees.
All right, so now you all have these new books. Andrea, what are you doing to promote your book and get the word out?
I mean, in general, aside from posting certain things on social media, sometimes I do events. Like I haven't done a big event for this book because, again, fire and all that other stuff. But there's 2 other people who are in the Chicken Soup for the Soul for Babies who've written some of the other books, Zena Pliska and Carol Silverstein, and they don't live that far from here. So I was thinking maybe we could do an event with like all of our books. And then aside from that, I connect with my local independent bookstores. I connect with my local library system, and I do all kinds of visits at all different kinds of places to just get the word out.
How about you, Molly, all the way up there in Minneapolis? How are you getting the word out?
The launch party is May 4th at Wild Rumpus Bookstore. Then we always go up to the North Shore of Lake Superior in the summer. So I'm hoping to do a bunch of bookstores up there and the nature centers and the state parks and that kind of stuff, probably more into the summer when it's tourist season. And I would love to do library story times for this book. I think that would be a great fit. I don't have things scheduled yet because it's not out for a while, but we have great funding for libraries in Minnesota. So I'm hoping to do some library story times as well.
And how about you, Sarah, up there in Massachusetts?
You know, you can never really know what the impact is of any individual event, but I think just trying to do more school visits. I do a lot of New England school visits. I was invited to a session at the Springfield Museum in Springfield, Massachusetts during Massachusetts Kidlit Fest through the Massachusetts Center of the Book. That's in May. I'm not sure if the date's been confirmed yet. So I'll be working with some of the educators there to do a little STEM activity. And yeah, just school visits. And, you know, I love my local bookshop, Whiteland Books. And then also, yeah, like making some videos for social media about a little bit about my process for Bean Sprout, about scientific illustration and observation, because I think for me, that's also another way that I sort of help myself calm down is just by trying to pay attention to something through drawing it. And then also some videos about my process for how I made the book in terms of the tissue paper prints, those kinds of things.
Okay, so what's coming next from each of you? Andrea, do you know what you have coming out next?
Well, actually, just this morning, I got sketches for a picture book that's coming out in 2027, I think, and it's adorable. And I have some more board books coming out with Charles Bridge, and we've actually worked with specialists in early childhood mathematics in order to come up with the story and how it all works. So it's really great to like be working with science and storytelling and culture and all of that. And then I have some chapter book coming out, and then I have some other stuff that I'm working on. I'm always working on something.
Wow, you are busy. And Molly, I'm guessing you're very busy too.
Yeah, I have a really exciting couple of years. So my book that's coming out before Far, Far Away is called Rings of Heartwood, Poems Far, Far Away. It's illustrated by Claudia McGeehee. It's published by the Minnesota Historical Society Press. So this will be out in March. It's poems about how animals grow with nonfiction sidebars and gorgeous, gorgeous scratchboard art. So that's next. And it's totally SEL because even though it's about animals, it's really about the emotions behind growing and grieving and getting big and moving on and all of those hard, messy things. So I have events going on for that. And then I have another Charles Bridge book on the roster for 26 that's called Everything Grandma Needs. It's about a family helping an elder to downsize and clutter clear and get out of her big old house and into a condo. And that too is just like full of emotional content as well as like the practical side of that process. And then another 26 book that I will just very briefly say, because it is totally relevant to the SEL. I have a book coming out with Free Spirit Publishing, which is a press that only does SEL titles. And that is called Your Cardboard Castle. And it's about how kids build forts during hard times to help them cope with hard times. So yeah, it's going to be a busy couple of years. I'm really excited.
And Sarah, what do you have coming out in terms of books or illustrations or the combo of them?
I illustrated a series of books by Leah Sipis, an early reader chapter book series called Miriam's Magical Creature Files. The first book comes out in March. The second book comes out in August, and I haven't started working on the third book, but it's about a little Orthodox Jewish girl who is trying to prove or disprove the existence of different magical creatures. Like the first book is about the Tooth Fairy. The second book is about dragons, which was super fun because I love drawing dragons. And then the third book is a mystery still. This spring, I'll be working on the final illustrations for a book that I wrote called The Most Perfect Box of Art Supplies. It's about perfectionism, surprise, about a kid who gets a box of like beautiful art supplies and is super excited to use them until they realize that they're not able to do everything as perfectly as they think they should do for the materials and sort of how they work through that. So I'm looking forward to working on those because I'll be working in my studio with some more traditional art stuff with multicolored ink drawings.
Well, I think you guys are all contributing beautifully to a love of learning and to helping those kids become the best versions of themselves. So Thank you so much for your incredible creativity and the contribution you're making to children's literature.
Thank you so much for having us. It was really lovely to have a chance to read Andrea and Molly's books ahead of time.
No, truly, thank you. And thank you for, again, Chicken Soup for the Soul, putting all that good stuff in the world.